Welcome to Kindness in Motion. Now, before we dive in, I want us to start with a moment that captures why this podcast exists. So, Parry, the world feels heavy sometimes, doesn't it?
It does. And I think that's why this conversation matters.
Because kindness isn't a luxury.
No, it's a lifeline.
Welcome to the Kindness in Motion podcast. I'm Suzy, and I'm joined by my co-host, Parry.
Suzy had a really cheesy joke here, but I'm not going to say it. So we're just going to move on.
Today, I'd like to introduce our listeners to Katie van Haften, an educator, a counsellor, and facilitator whose work spans decades and continents.
So your focus, Katie, is something that sits right at the heart of what we hold here. How the words that we use shape our experience and how listening can become a quiet act of kindness.
And we are really excited to explore that with you.
So, Katie, to begin,
what does kindness mean to you?
When you ask that question, I immediately think of the times I'm moved, and it's nearly always when somebody's made an act of kindness. I very rarely in other circumstances, I'm moved to tears. But when I hear about somebody just doing something very thoughtful for somebody else, I well up and I feel incredibly grateful. So kindness for me is when it's unexpected often, and also when there's nothing expected in return, except that truly the person being kind does receive something in return.
We spoke to a psychologist previously, and she said that because of the dopamine and the chemical reaction that's released, it isn't an entirely selfless act because you do get something back. Of course, the intention could be selfless.
Motivation is not necessarily to get something back, but actually that is what happens. And it's because I believe that when you create an act of kindness, you create an act of connection, actually. And that is the thing that releases the oxytocin.
Connection is something that's incredibly important to you, isn't it, Katie? You talked briefly about what you are achieving with listening spaces, and I would love for you to tell us a bit more of how you came to this idea.
I've been teaching courses for an organization. I was licensed to teach some of their material over the last 40 years. So I've been teaching courses in self-esteem and finding a sense of purpose on and off for about the last 30, 40 years. I'm retired now. I'm not really retired because I keep dipping in because I find it just so rewarding continuing with this kind of work. Over the years, I've always thought, gosh, there's something I'd like to do that's mine, that I've created from what I've learned, an expression of the best that I've learned from all those other things that were created by other people. And so one of the luxuries of being retired was I had a chance to look through all my old feedback sheets. At the end of each course, we have feedback and people say what they like, what didn't work for them. And I suddenly started noticing a theme. And the theme was that even though we were teaching incredibly powerful tools and things to do and ways to look at things and all these sort of things that you can learn, actually the thing that most people found most valuable across the board, which was astonishing because I had not really noticed this pattern, was the opportunity to have somewhere where people really listen well and that you can talk and be heard. It seemed that was what people really valued. And I thought, gosh, that's such a small thing. I thought, how about creating a place where people can simply be heard? No other agenda. And certainly not an agenda where you're fixing something. A lot of the places where you can be heard are to do with, I've got this specific problem, so I need to go and see somebody. They will listen to me about that problem. So the best example of that is AA. I suddenly thought, hang on, surely being heard is just a human thing, just a human need. Everybody has it. It doesn't need to be pathologized and made into a medical thing. I'm trying to normalize being heard. And the bit you said about language, the thing about language is interesting there, because what we say to each other is we need to have a talk or let's have a chat. We don't say let's have a listen to each other. And I'm going to try and turn that around.
I think in our society, so much is placed on the importance of what you express. It's always about expressing and putting stuff out, whereas actually listening is extremely active. in order to process the different layers of what someone is saying and communicating verbally and non-verbally, you have to be really engaged. And I think that fallacy of having a chat and it being all about the speaking is a brilliant way to reframe a conversation.
That's what I'm hoping to do, because certainly if you have a conflict with somebody in the listening spaces, I hope people will come and share all kinds of stuff they're excited about or stuff that they're upset about, but it doesn't really matter because it's their space to use as they want. But I think when there is conflict in relationships, the tendency is it's the other person's fault. They're the main problem. Therefore, I need to tell them what they're doing wrong. And then if they only understand what my position, then things will get better. Well, does that work? Not usually. What works better is that one person to say, come on, I'll hear you out. Let me hear you out. And then if you've really heard someone out, then there's a possibility that things could shift in a different way. At least it opens up that possibility.
I love that. And also thinking about it from kindness in our perspective, it's a lovely way to reframe the approach to conflict, right? Conflict doesn't always feel nice. It can feel horrible to be in. The question of whether you can just sit and listen and truly hear someone expressing themselves from an opposing point of view, that suddenly seems doable. That doesn't seem like conflict anymore. That feels like something that you can engage in and lean into.
How would you encourage people to listen? Would there be a framework that you lead, like a workshop, or would it be something more individual?
One of the main things about listening across the board is that really good quality listening. And let's face it, there's different kinds of listening. We can listen in a conversation and just have a chat, or we can make a conscious effort to listen in a slightly different way. I think what I'm going for is to have people experience being heard in a more attentive, present way, which means that the listener has no agenda. Now, obviously, when you're in conflict, it is possible to put the agenda aside, at least temporarily, and say, I'm going to get into this person's shoes by just hearing them out. And so what I do, and it's still being developed, but I've been running workshops online mainly. But what people have liked is the bit, which I've done at the beginning, which is 5 minutes each, just to talk about whatever you want. At the beginning, it was 3 minutes each. And then people, it's not long enough. I want 5 minutes. So 5 minutes, and then they just swap over. And the listener doesn't comment, doesn't respond, doesn't do anything at all other than pays really good attention to what is being heard. And people will tend to nod a little bit or perhaps go. But even that is discouraged. It's literally be present with that person as they share. So the person actually talking has not only the experience of being heard, but also hearing themselves. And that also seems to be really useful to the person who's speaking. They often comment, I heard myself say that, and I hadn't really thought it through before, but now I'm seeing it in a slightly different light. They've had the space in which to express themselves. If it's in your head and it's all spinning around, it's not as clear as when you voice it and put it out there. And so people are hearing themselves, and then that's helping them shift without any input from the other person other than pure attention. So the first bit is that, and then we generally unpick what we've learned. So what was it like being heard, if you haven't had the experience before, for 5 minutes when nobody talked, nobody responding? And some people really love it, and some people go, oh no, it was really weird. I prefer somebody to comment back. So then we move into the second part of the workshop, where I introduce a different way of listening in each session. So there are lots of styles of listening and lots of techniques, if you like. So the first bit is kept sacrosanct in a non-religious way. Then the second bit is let's explore different listening styles, because after all, we have choice. And we could look at a situation and think, actually, I think I'm just going to keep quiet while I listen this time. I could try this different way of listening. For example, there are ways like responding, and generally advise people not to give advice.
Okay.
That's not good for me, no.
Not giving advice. Giving advice leads people in that direction, unless the person who was talking says, actually, I would really like advice. Now, funnily enough, I'm actually a person, when I have a problem, I quite like listening to lots of advice from people. But some people absolutely don't want that at all. But we do experiment with different styles, and we do playback, which is repeating back words that people have said. Sometimes people hear it a little wrong, and then the person who spoke can go, no, what I meant was da 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 da.
Yeah.
Or we do a sort of thing which I call reflect back, which is saying, oh, I imagine you must be pretty cross about that. Then the person goes, I'm not cross, I'm fucking furious. Oh, sorry.
Oh,
That's okay, don't
oh,
worry.
we'll have to scrap the whole podcast.
Apparently, we are allowed a few swear words without being told off. It's obvious you're very passionate about this. What intrigues me, I don't know if you ever experienced this, Parry. I did a 2-year workshop, really. One of the techniques we used was sitting, listening to the other performer, and then we had to repeat back. So it's quite similar, but I think you go more in depth. Did you ever do that?
We both come from performance backgrounds. In other kind of settings, I love psychology and coaching. Some of what you're saying in terms of active listening is stuff that I've touched upon. I'm just processing all the different ways of listening that you mentioned. Is that something that you recognize from your background in kind of therapy and coaching, some of what Suzy just described?
Looking back at the therapeutic approaches, they are, as I say, there is an agenda, which is to help somebody feel better in some way, right?
Okay.
Now, in a sense, also what I'm offering does generally have that effect. So one of the things that I've asked people is when you come in, rate yourself on how you feel. You don't have to share it. Just keep yourself, scale 0 to 10, how do you feel? People come in later, they'll say, oh, I was a 5 when I came in. And then I say at the end, can you monitor how you feel now? And just interested because of my research in this. Everybody apart from 2 people felt better. 2 people felt the same. Nobody has so far reported feeling worse, and that's out of probably a few hundred people now.
So there's a positive effect to
Yeah.
these exercises. We all know how to chat. Like you say, we don't really know the effectiveness of just listening. I know you've worked across the UK, India, Nepal, Ethiopia, and Senegal. What did those experiences, those travels teach you about how language shapes our connection with each other?
I'm not sure it taught me that much about the language because obviously I don't speak most of those languages. I went to Senegal because I speak French and I was delivering a course there, training local salespeople to teach them how to sell in an ethical way. But when I got there, thinking that they could understand me because I speak standard French, I couldn't understand them at all because they were speaking in a sort of local vernacular. It was really challenging. The connections, though, were lovely. The people were very warm. And the main thing I've learned from traveling everywhere is, in fact, initially you think of travel, or I thought of travel as meeting new people, new ways of being, seeing sights all around the world, fantastic landscapes, all that, eating different food. And of course, the cultures are different, but the people are the same. We're the same all across the planet. We have the same yearnings, the same longings, ways of being, actually. And small societies are probably more like England used to be many years ago, where there was smaller communities and people didn't move around so much. But for example, in India, I visited some villages in the foothills of the Himalayas. And the one thing about India is even when you live very remotely, there is a very good education available. That's one of the unique things about India. They really are hot on education. And the kids from these villages, when they grow up, they end up going to university. I was actually involved with an amazing organization. I'm trying to remember, Village Ways. I was training their guides. So these young men, actually there were some women too, were trained up to provide guiding facilities for people who wanted to visit the villages and see how people live in a traditional way.
Great.
Oh, wow. That's fascinating.
One thing that came to mind as you were talking, just to bring it back to the different cultures, did you find that different cultures listened differently and shared presence in different ways?
I think that one of the things that probably stood out, this has been part of my evolution, but certainly I think there's a lot of curiosity in those cultures. So I wouldn't have thought of myself as a particularly interesting person over and above everyone else, but my goodness, were they interested in everything about me? And they were also, I would say in general, a bit more open in a sometimes disarming way. In India, I remember this bunch of women came up to me and said, does your hair really, do you ever put oil in your hair? And I was like, no, we don't do that in England. I'm sure some people do. Your hair looks horrible. It's like, okay. And this was an act of kindness from their perspective.
Yeah.
Do you want to come over tonight to our hut? We'll put oil in your hair, make you look beautiful. Oh, okay. It was an interesting experience.
Yeah.
And I had these 3 women rubbing oil into my hair, and I didn't like what it looked like, but they thought I looked great afterwards. So it was a lovely opportunity and experience. Yeah.
And they were just strangers
They lived in the village.
in the village.
They were strangers, and they obviously were very concerned that I wasn't making the best of myself. And for them, it was a way of just coming together and putting it right. It was quite sweet.
That is amazing. So was this a very rural community?
It was a very rural community.
I'm amazed that they brought you into their home
Yeah.
without any question.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. This village probably had 150 people living in it. So my presence there as the only person visiting from afar was a source of great novelty, and they were fascinated by me.
Like you said, it was a strange way of kindness. It wasn't something that you were culturally used to. But do you think that we have become so individualized and not in a community? Do you think people trying to connect, not necessarily by insulting your hand, but by drawing them in some way, would be effective and a good way to build?
Kindness is very underrated, and it's so easy to do. It's such a tiny little thing. I remember when I split up from my partner at the time, 10 years ago, one woman sent me a message and she said, sorry to hear about this, come and visit, and we promise to cherish you. And I just burst into tears, but in a good way. And that's what I want. I want to be cherished. Now, what that means in her house is she's going to be kind to me and cook for me and sit around and chat with me, or listen to me probably. It really hit the spot. And I think that's what kindness can do. It can make a huge difference in somebody's day, even one act of kindness, definitely.
It's like with listening, because your concept is, in my head, I've got this lovely comfy room and there's just you and another person. And maybe you just sit there in silence for a while.
You mentioned earlier, do you know, when we started this and we had all these tech challenges, and then you said, oh, let's take a breath. So another thing that I do is I ask people to listen to themselves. So that's listening in rather than listening outwards. And that can be really, really useful, because most of the time unless we have very powerful feelings, like I'm really angry, or I'm really upset, or I'm really happy, most of the time we're not really aware of what our emotional state is, or even our physical state. And so it's very, very helpful, particularly I would say in the context of listening in and kindness, is that once you listen in, then you can address yourself in a way and treat yourself with kindness.
Any techniques that you could share with our listeners to help them to focus on what is going on internally?
Sure. You up for it? I'll take you through it right now.
Do it.
Yes. Okay. So what I'm going to ask you to do is to sit upright in your chair in a comfortable position, and then close your eyes, which is preferable. So just soft focus your eyes, and then take 3 deep breaths into your body through your nose, as deep as you can, and then let it out through your mouth. And after you've done the 3 deep breaths, just continue to breathe normally. As you're breathing normally, notice in your body, you might want to change the way you're sitting, or you might want to yawn. Anything's fine, really, whatever your body's asking for. As you're breathing normally, you might notice some thoughts you're having, thoughts that came with you before you started doing the exercise, thoughts in response to what I'm saying. And that's all fine too. Simply let them pass by. Now, as you continue to breathe, you may notice not only physical feelings, but also emotional feelings. Is there calm in some parts of your body? Is there excitement? Is there some nervousness? What are you noticing?
Panic.
There you go. So notice those things, and then breathe one more time deeply into your body. and then come back. The thing about this is it's absolutely fine however it goes. It's a way of slowing things down and reconnecting with yourself and becoming just more aware of what's going on internally. I usually do it a bit longer, but not much longer, just at the start of a session, because it helps people arrive. They say, leave your baggage at the door. They don't actually tell us how. So this is a way of, this is how you can do it. One way. There's lots of ways, but that's one way you can do it.
And it's interesting from the acting perspective. This exercise is something we would do just to strengthen the body for breathing. Once you introduce just listen to what your mind is saying, it adds a different level to it. How did you feel?
I found it very calming, and I found a lot of space and kind of focus within that. I think bringing it back to listening as well, it seems to be so important to take that time to listen to yourself, align and find that stillness so that you can truly show up and be present with someone else as well. Because I think about how disconnected I get just in my day-to-day running through life. If I've got all of that going on in the background, there's no way that I can fully show up and listen with all of my empathic capabilities. To really show up and to really listen actively and with awareness, you have to take care of yourself as well.
Absolutely. You expressed it really well and you're spot on with that. Actually, that's what I do in the sessions. I don't tell people anything. I allow people to discover things at their own pace. And sometimes they discover things that I don't know. They're learning for themselves. They're having that experience. And that's what I want. I'm not there to be didactic in any shape or form. I'm simply facilitating people through.
So obviously both of us are doing the MA. You're a little ahead of me and understand the process partly because I'm just being introduced to discomfortable. That was why I applied for the course, because of putting yourself into a situation that you're not comfortable with.
The only way you grow.
Learning to fail is the best way of learning. So it's like there's a lot of mental preparation that's needed. And in this technological age, do you find that we tend to rely more on social media? It's much more surface level than how conversations used to be.
I think that's pretty true across the board, particularly for younger people. I think for some young people, online contact can be a lifeline, but it can also be really challenging. Obviously, that's another whole new topic. For example, I have a friend who's also working in a very similar field as me. He's produced this amazing app. You put into ChatGPT and it's like a companion. And so you can talk to it and then it responds in a supportive way. When I first heard about it, I thought, that's not for me. I don't want to talk to a machine. I want to talk to people. I was self-righteous about it. But he asked me to test it. When there isn't a human being around, I would use that. So I think the tech can be used in a really great way. Sadly, the opposite is true too.
Yeah, grok being one of them, isn't it? But I do have to agree with you. There was a point where I was failing badly with the podcast when I was first learning, and I was possessed. There is no escape from what looks like failure, because learning to fail is a new concept for me as well. It does make that difference, but it doesn't have the warmth of another human being.
Yeah, Arthur could resolve your problems, but he couldn't listen to you.
Yeah, or cuddle.
You said the word cuddles. There's something about kindness and just the touch of a hand, isn't there? Putting a hand on a shoulder or something like that.
Oh, maybe we've got a new business. Get a USB port and have a hand attached to your shoulder.
One autopat.
I love it. That's so funny. It was so great. It's like having a mini robot in the house.
Yeah. You've just finished your first term.
No, I am halfway through.
You are halfway through. I'm
Yeah,
terrible with times. I know you are going to be doing a website. Are there other ways that you're going to spread awareness and do workshops and things like that? People really want to attend.
So definitely going to be running workshops because my intention is to create this product as a 10 different ways of listening attached to the sacrosanct open space listening without any response, then to make it into a pack. And then supposing you attended one and you liked it and you thought, oh, I'd love to do this, but I'd like to do it in my village or with these people in this group, or introduce it to my school, then basically you can have the pack and it'll explain how to do it, how to run it. It's not requiring any expertise, doesn't require any training in any sense. And you can just go off. After all, listening it's in some senses, it's very simple. And I don't even want it to be a technique. I just want us to all get on board with what's possible when we listen.
Back into that innate instinct.
The way I see it moving on is that I will set it up, I'll trial it, it won't be perfect. And then I will roll it out and give it to people to roll out in their own environments, either online or in person. And it'll be a meeting place.
That is fantastic. Do you need testers?
Yeah, I think we can definitely improve our listening skills.
There is something I mentioned in an email about the Friendship Bench initiative in Zimbabwe.
Yeah. Well, Friendship Bench it's slightly different because it comes from a therapeutic approach. So it's a way of addressing mental health issues that there was nothing available for people with mental health issues. And it was a bit of a brainwave, wasn't it? Using elders who perhaps don't have any active work anymore to sit on a bench and listen to other people's problems. Then they were also trained up, which I think is great, but that requires much more resources and so forth. And so for me, it's just let's normalize listening.
Paying active attention to another person.
I love the idea of bringing it into schools as well. One of my driving forces is the fact that bullying is still so rife in schools. Perhaps if children more in the teenage sector were taught how to listen and the importance of it without it making it sound like a teacher making them do something, it has so much potential.
It really does. An interesting take that I happen to believe is true on bullying is that people who bully actually have very low self-esteem.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason they bully is because they make someone else feel bad or look bad at the expense of their self-esteem. Yeah, so they're trying to steal their self-esteem at the expense of the other person by making them look bad. They only do that because they don't feel good about themselves in the first place. And probably those people who do the bullying probably don't have someone who listens well to them. It all links up.
Yeah, and I think if you've got that safe space for listening as well, it can be an escape for those that are bullied, and even the bulliers be able to talk to someone without the judgment, just listen to what they have to say. Obviously, I'm sure there's loads of safeguards in regards to that type of thing. I am going to love watching your journey, and I am 100% happy to be a test bunny anytime you want it.
That's wonderful.
Part of what I think is so beautiful about the listening spaces is not only that people listen and hear, but that it automatically grants a voice, right? There's no kind of pre-qualifying for having to be worthy for you to be able to speak. And I think that is so important, and it will be transformative for people to bear witness and listen, and for people to be able to express themselves. So that it's just a really beautiful thing that you're bringing forward with your work. If there are people that want to become better listeners in our audience, what are some key things that we can bear in mind to be able to show up and listen more effectively?
So I would be devil's advocate here and say, if you're thinking that somebody isn't listening to you, try listening to them first. It doesn't have to be a long piece of time, but if somebody's talking to you and you normally think they don't listen to you, then carve out, say, 5 minutes or 10 minutes or even half an hour. Really listen to them. When people have been well heard, they're actually much more likely to be willing to listen back. So turn it around. I'm going to listen to them. And then you'll see that there will be results. So I was just thinking, this just happened anecdotally. I had a phone call from a friend and they were very upset on the phone and they kept on talking and talking and talking. And I had no idea what to do or advise. I didn't know what to do. I thought, I'll just listen. And then suddenly they said, oh, gosh, sorry, I've been talking for ages. Oh, I feel much better now. What did you do? I'd done something. I said, I don't think I did anything, really. I listened to you. And they said, yeah, that's great. Thank you so much. And then they hung up and off they went. And it was like, okay, I'm not quite sure what happened there. He honestly didn't think I'd done anything, but clearly I had.
You gave them that connection.
You've just basically sold the whole listen thing. My problem is I tune out as well. But if you actively listen, you will benefit so much more from it. Do you find that,
Well,
Parry?
I think that consciously making an effort to focus your attention and really hear and listen, it creates a deeper level of connection because it's connecting on a values basis, not overtly, but I feel, for me, when I feel like someone's listening deeply and presently, I get the signal that I matter to them, a significance, and it's loads of like boosts without having to be a boost, if that makes sense. So it's a nice little ego trip for me to know that of someone's attention for that long. I think when people are able to listen actively and deeply, it can be a hugely affirming, life affirming experience that just makes you glad to be human and with other humans.
Yes. And the interesting thing is that when we're listening, we may form judgments in our heads about what we're hearing. And that's fine. It's a human thing. We do that. We do form judgments. But if we're listening in that way that you describe, then we're not actually responding with our judgments. And that is, as you say, really affirming because you're not getting the judgments about what you've said. So it's just acceptance.
I think I saw a study that was done from theatre, but when people are watching a certain type of theatrical performance, they forget they're watching a play and they go straight into that deep listening, physiological listening, and straight into empathy in their brain. I think that certainly the more we can learn as a society to be present and listen, the more empathy we'll cultivate.
The interesting thing is that presence, if one is able to achieve presence, then the effect that has on us is that we are able to have more choice in how we respond. That's something for you to experiment with and see.
Yeah,
The thing is, I just think this is quite funny because this is my thing. One of my kids said, "You're not listening," and I thought, well, I said, just because that's my thing doesn't mean I have to listen all the time.
Yeah, we have the ability to choose. I think it's important to make our listeners aware of that.
Surely if you study listening, you're a connoisseur, so you can discern who should be listened to over others.
Yeah, and if I'm willing in a given moment. Depends on the context, doesn't it?
Yeah. Absolutely. Katie, thank you so much for this conversation. There is such warmth and gentleness in the way you invite people. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I've really loved speaking with you, Katie. It's great to have met you.
And to everyone who's listening, we hope this episode leaves you with a little more space to breathe and to listen and to choose words that opens up rather than closes.
I've really enjoyed meeting you. I'm glad we overcame the technical challenges.
If this lifted you even a little, hit follow, share it with someone who could use a spark of kindness, and come with us as this movement grows. You're part of this now, and we're really glad you're here.